Friends, the passion of Jesus Christ is the world's most powerful story. It is also our story. We relate to it on many levels, and especially when we identify with the people that were involved in Jesus' crucifixion. That has been my intent through this Lenten season, to preach my sermons from the Gospel of Mark on the last 24 hours of Jesus' life, and to look at not only our Lord, but those who were involved in that drama. When you study the Passion story, you cannot read it without being confronted by the humiliation of Jesus. Jesus was humiliated by the religious and civic leaders, by the Roman soldiers and the crowd. They all sought to disgrace, shame, and embarrass him. We are told that a certain man from Cyrene in northern Africa, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was forced to join in that humiliation of Jesus by being compelled to carry his cross. The actions of the Jews were venomous with hatred. The consent of Pilate had been a cowardly evasion of responsibility. There was cruelty and abuse, obviously, in the action of the soldiers. It was all part of the mockery Jesus would have to endure for those who associate with him. So, my friend, if people ever make fun or make light of your faith in Jesus Christ, it is helpful to remember that they did it to our Lord on a far greater level. When Jesus was sent by Pilate to be flogged before crucifixion, believe me, it was no simple spanking. The Roman whips were designed to induce maximum blood loss. Many criminals died from the flogging before they ever got to the cross where they would be crucified. Then the soldiers made sport of Jesus. We're told there in Mark, what Jan read, they hit him with a stick on the head. Several times they spit on him. They put that robe and that crown of thorns on his head simply to mock him, to make fun. And when they got bored, they put that cross on him and sent him out in the streets to walk to Calvary as an example to the community. The mocking only added insult to injury. And yet our Lord took it all with grace and courage. Jesus endured the pain and the humiliation when he could have called down legions of angels to destroy his tormentors. But he didn't. Friend, in the torture and the humiliation of our Lord, you and I see clearly the human condition at its worst. There is something radically wrong with creation, within our souls, that separated us from the goodness of God. We are broken creatures living in a broken world. Even the best of us are capable of such evil, and until we see that, and understand that about ourselves, we cannot truly appreciate what God has done for us. Now, I'm willing to stick my neck out on the line and say that there may be a few of us here this morning who have been listening to what I've been saying, and when I made that statement, even the best of us are capable of evil. Some of us probably thought, I would never mock Jesus. I would never humiliate Jesus. Our annual meeting will be next month, and in my report to you all, I have quoted from David Kinnaman and Gabe Lyon from their book that is entitled Unchristian. They state the following. In the last decade, the number of young adults who are not affiliated with any religion has doubled. According to the vast research, the reason young people are turning away from Christianity is because they perceive Christians as anti-homosexual, judgmental, hypocritical, old-fashioned, too political, and insensitive, caring only about adding members and money to their churches. Many young adults believe that modern-day Christianity no longer seems Christian. They like Jesus, they just don't like his church. You know, I have family members who believe that. My friend, the defensiveness or that feeling that you may feel of being defensive about those statements only demonstrate how true those statements may be. We are mocking Jesus when we do not live by his Spirit and his teaching. We are mocking Jesus when we claim his name, yet we do not display his character. We are mocking Jesus when we fail to love our neighbor as ourselves, when we fail to give the coat off of our back, go that second or third mile, or when we do our will instead of God's will. We truly have failed to be Christ in our world. We have failed because of our nature, our sin nature. We have allowed maybe Jesus to come into our life, but not be the Lord of our life. Not controlling. We need God's reconciliation. So how does Christ's death on the cross reconcile us to God? This is a deep theological concept that is known as atonement. Some refer to it as at-one-ment. Atonement. One of the most helpful verses in the Bible is from Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11. For the life of the creature is in the blood, and I have given it to you to make atonement for yourselves on the altar. It is the blood that makes atonement for one's life. The word atonement is mentioned twice in that single verse. It was God's devised plan. By the shedding of blood, two will be brought together as one. In the Old Testament, the blood of the animal would be that atonement, that at-one-ment between humanity and God. The shed blood would cover the sin of the individual. That's why, especially during Passover, sheep were slain by the thousands. The priests were ceaselessly dealing with blood sacrifices, day in and day out. That is why you and I must resist modern tendency to remove the shedding of blood from our theology or from our hymns. For the Bible says, without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sin. But my friend, do you realize that those sacrifices never permanently took away sin? Never. They were not meant to permanently take away sin. They were meant for us to learn about God's nature and about our sin and about one sacrifice that will be offered for all people, all sin, for all time. The people in the Old Testament went away, I imagine, from those sacrifices rejoicing, which lasted for a while. But then they would be back with another animal because of sin. 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 That's what caused Martin Luther, when he finally turned the corner and felt the emptiness of his sin-repeating religion, turned and found the depth of Christ's love, the power of Christ's grace, and the motivation to live like Christ. Prior to that, it was not uncommon for a monk to be heard in his room repeating, "Oh, my sin, my sin, my sin." There was that awful desperation in their prayers, hoping to make everything work out right. Do you have any idea how many religious people still live like that today? They have the same frame of reference. They live their lives in a shallow faith, with no more hope than those who brought those animals one after the other back to be sacrificed by the priests. And those Old Testament sacrifices never took sin away permanently until Christ. But some people today are more sophisticated. They ignore the shed blood of Christ and are more comfortable with what is called the moral influence theory. Basically, it says that the love and the courage we see in Jesus is enough to change our hearts before God. We turn to God not because the Lamb of God had to be slain, but because we are affected by the love that is demonstrated there. But the problem with that theory is that we do not walk in that love because of sin's power and presence to reign. Some of you may remember the name of Emmett Till. Emmett Till was a 14-year-old African-American boy from Chicago who went to visit his relatives in Mississippi in 1955. On a dare, he whistled at a white woman behind the cash register at a store in that small town in Mississippi. A few nights later, the woman's husband and another man took Emmett Till from his great-uncle's house. They took him to a barn where they beat him, gouged out one of his eyes, and shot him in his head. Then they tied his body to a piece of farm equipment, and they dropped that body in the Tallahatchie River. 3 days later, the police found the body of Emmett Till. The only way his mother could identify him was by the ring that he was still wearing that she had given to him. when they held the funeral for Emmett Till in Chicago, his mother insisted that the casket be opened so the world could see how her son had suffered. Pictures of his body circulated in black publications all over America and the world and are still on the internet. The effects for many people, both black and white, seeing what happened to that 14-year-old boy, was to galvanize support for the civil rights movement in America. After Emmett Till, nothing had changed, but everything was different. The problem is we do not walk in love because of sin's presence and power to reign. There is that so-called Christian group called Westboro Baptist Church in Topeka, Kansas. Their mission is still to spread hatred toward homosexuals. They use slurs to refer to gay people and make it a practice to protest at funerals of American soldiers. They still believe that God is killing our soldiers because American people accept gay people. The problem is, we do not walk in love because of sin's power and presence to reign. Over the past year, our nation has experienced a divisive election in which racism, xenophobia, and religious bigotry have been constant. We are seeing not only a reflection of broken relationships, but broken communal values and a lopsided foreign policy that spends drastically more on defense than diplomacy or development.